Hey everybody, welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I am your host Rob, and today we're going to be talking about what version of D&D is right for you. I don't know. It's really going to depend on you, but I'm going to look at a couple of different things about it. And the reason this comes up is because if you're like me and you follow a lot of gaming channels on YouTube, and I watch YouTube probably more than I watch anything else. I watch it on my TV in the bedroom, I watch it in the living room on my TV, I watch it in the game room on my tablet, sometimes on my phone, but I watch YouTube a lot. And if you have been paying attention to gaming channels on YouTube in the past week, you have no doubt heard about One D&D. There is tons and tons of videos about One D&D, and it seems to primarily go one way or the other. People either love the idea or hate the idea. I'm not going to put the video up here. You can pull up the One D&D video and watch it for yourself that Watsy put out. But the basic gist of it is that in 2024, so 2 years from now, they're putting out a new edition of D&D that is not a new edition. It is just the One D&D. Because they claim that they're taking the best of everything from all versions of D&D and putting it together. And if you like the stuff they're saying in the video, that's great. Enjoy it, because D&D is all about playing and running what you enjoy. However, there are several issues I have with it, and I've had issues with 5th Ed for a long time. So it was no surprise that when the same design team at Woke of the Coast started pumping out what they were going to do with it, that I wouldn't like it. And I don't. I'm not interested in it really at all. There are just so many things that I find stupid about it. From some of the way I don't really mind the idea of lineages for the most part that they're changing stuff to, but I hate some of the other ideas that they're doing with it. Like basically there's the Ardlings or whatever it is, where you can pick your own type of furry to play. I don't know, it's weird. I'm not really interested in that. There's a new thing where monsters can't crit. They just have abilities that'll recharge if they recharge. But they can't crit. Only player characters can crit. And you can only crit with combat, from what I understand. So that means you can't crit with spells, I guess? Or maybe if it's a combat spell. I don't know if it's just attack rolls. I haven't read the play test, which isn't truly a play test from what I understand. It's more of a, here's our ideas and fill out a survey. There's just a lot about it that I don't really care for. I can see very quickly where they are trying to pull everything under one umbrella. It's probably why they bought out D&D Beyond, and if they go the way I think they're going to go, then they'll end up pulling their license from things like Roll20 and Foundry and stuff like that, so that you will have to use their online system, where basically it seems like a DM is just going to push a button for a monster and the monster does everything. So you really don't need a DM anymore, I guess. I don't know. It's I don't fully understand all of it. I just know that they showed scenes from their virtual tabletop that they're trying to implement for this, and how cool it's going to be, and I highly doubt it, but and that's just because since 3rd edition they've been trying to implement some type of online presence, and it's never really worked out, and the few times it seemed like it was going to work out, they pulled all support for it. So it's never been a long-lasting thing with them. And it really takes away from what D&D is at its roots. And to me, that's friends sitting around the table playing the game. I don't like online gaming. I will do it once in a while with a friend of mine if I have to. But I don't prefer online gaming, so I'm definitely not going to switch to a version of D&D that pretty much is just online game. It's like a video game that's really slow. So I'm not really into that all that much. And they're just there are so many things about it that I just don't care for, that I immediately was like, nope, nope, nope. The one that I found this hilarious too, that they're trying to use this as a selling point, that there are no more versions of D&D. This is the D&D. So it's completely backwards compatible. Don't get scared. Except that you're going to have to rebuy at least all the core books. So, I mean, if the core books have been out for 10 years at $50 a pop, regular retail. So even if they stay at $50 a pop, you're looking at $150 for the 3 core books. But if it's 100% backwards compatible, then why do you need 3 new core books? Well, that's because it's not 100% backwards compatible. You'll have to adjust things. And they're taking things from other books that you've already bought and adding them back into these core books to make them part of One D&D, which again means it's not really One D&D. And here's why you know it's a lie, right? Here's the thing. They are a company, and they're not a company who owns themselves. They're owned by Hasbro. And Hasbro doesn't care about D&D one way or the other. All they care about is the bottom line. They want numbers. They want sales. So why would a company who wants sales get behind the idea of you changing the game to where people will no longer have to buy books anymore? If it was 100% backwards compatible, your players are going to cut down to buying a player's handbook, if they buy it at all and don't just pirate it. And then your DMs are going to buy the other 2 books, right? Maybe a few adventures here and there. But those are the ways it breaks down now for pretty much any version of D&D. So why would you be okay with the idea of backwards compatibility? Does not work for a company who tries to make money selling books. If everything is backwards compatible, then it's only a short stint of people buying books, and then they don't buy books anymore because everything's backwards compatible. So everything cannot be backwards compatible in order for them to continue to make money. And because they have to please Hasbro's bottom line, they will continue to push new books on you, even if it's just in a digital format. Which, if that's the route that they're taking with D&D, I absolutely would not get on board with it. Again, that's just me. If this is something that excites you and that's what you want to get behind, that's fine. That's cool, because I've always said play the game you want to play. But one of the concepts that they push in this video is very much a concept of, this is the way you play D&D now. And this is the way to play D&D, and this covers everything. And the problem with that is, now you do have some younger generation players, maybe in their 20s, that don't consider older versions of D&D or older rules from other sets because they have never been exposed to them. And they think, well, 5th Ed is the only way to play D&D because that's what they produce. That's what's put out. Not true. There is a lot to change and do with that, but they don't recognize that because they haven't been exposed to other stuff. Any of us who have been dungeon mastering or game mastering or whatever for several years, any amount of time, have learned one secret, and that is that most of us don't play by the rules, at least not as they're written in the DMG and the Player's Handbook. I know some really great dungeon masters that never use monsters as written in the monster manual. They always change stuff, or they'll use stats for one monster to appear some other kind of monstrosity just to keep their players on their toes. But even more than that, most dungeon masters who are running games, over the years, from playing different editions, especially older editions up to the newer editions, tend to cobble things together to kind of make their own game. D&D has always been like this from the very beginning. Gygax said a long time ago that we didn't even need rules for this game. It was really up to the DMs how they wanted to do things. And that stands true to this very day. I do it myself. I run a fantasy game. I ran white box for a long time, but even with white box, I still I had to add stuff onto it to make it do what I wanted it to do. So I went back to basic fantasy because I do like the rule set to basic fantasy. And it's a pretty clean cut rule set for old school D&D. But I don't run basic fantasy as just basic fantasy. And I understand there are some people, especially people starting out, that may run it like that. But you don't have to. You can cobble stuff together from wherever you like. I don't like the turn undead table in basic fantasy. I like the way it's broken up on the turn undead table in white box way better. So even back before I switched to white box, I had cut that table out and replaced it in my GM screen, and I made a printout for my character, my players, for anybody playing a cleric of this is the table you use for turning undead. I pulled it from white box because I like it better. So I use basic fantasy as a base set of rules, but I pull things from other rule sets that I like a lot, and I cobble them into it until the game has kind of become my own. So it's basic fantasy, but I use stuff from white box. I use mending from white box because I really like that. I think that helps out a low-level party, helps them survive a little longer. I use stuff from 5th edition D&D. I like advantage and disadvantage. I would much rather do that than adding modifiers. So I pull stuff from Dungeon Professor's Deathbringer game. I like the background tables that he has in there for characters for simple background. And I like the Deathbringer dice. That's something that I've included in my Friday night game, which is basic fantasy cobbled with other stuff. And my players have Deathbringer dice that they use. So I use, stuff from white box, stuff from Deathbringer, stuff from 5th edition. I take these things and I add them on to the base rules that I like, and then that becomes my game. And that's what I mean, and it's what a lot of YouTubers and Dungeon Masters and stuff mean when they say make the game yours. You can change it to be whatever you want. I have the big Monstrosities book from Sword and Sorcery. And somebody had pointed out when I said it was compatible with white box that white box just uses D6s for all their stats, like all their hit points, damage, everything was D6s. And when playing white box, I still use the Monstrosities book, and even though it has varying dice, I just switch everything to D6s. So everybody's using D6s. Your weapon does so many D6 damage. This spell does so many D6 damage. Everything, if it's hit dice, they have so many D6 of hit dice. And there are people who will probably argue with me and go, no, that can't work. Well, it does, because I've done it for a very long time, and it works very well. Now, using that same Monstrosities book with basic fantasy, I will probably use the damage and stuff out of there as is. This weapon does a D4, this weapon does a D8, because the characters in basic fantasy are doing different dice damage. Everything's not just a D6. I think the only thing that I do D6s across the board is hit dice for monsters, and that's just because I think they use D8s in basic fantasy, and I don't know. I have a lot of D6, so I like using D6s. But the point is, you take the rules and the stuff from different games that you like, and you cobble it together to make the game you want. So the answer to the question of what version of D&D is right for you is really, it's kind of up to you. What rules do you like? Find a base set of rules. Maybe it is 5th edition for you. Maybe you really like it. I don't like it, but I don't like it mainly, not just because of their politics of the company, but I don't like it because of it's basically fantasy superheroes. And I like more the hero's journey type fantasy. So I tend more to lean more towards old school for my my base rules, which is why I'm using basic fantasy. But if you like that kind and you want to use that, that's fine. There are plenty of people, even people at WotC, that don't play by the rules. They use their own house rules and things they've pulled in from other games and added them to the game they're playing. And I think that that is the answer to the question, is that is the right D&D for you, the one that you enjoy running. Do you enjoy running a game straight out of the book, rules as written? Then that's the game for you. Do you enjoy taking a base set of rules and then tacking stuff onto it from other games that you like? Then that's the game for you. Don't let any company, I don't care whether it's WotC or anybody else, tell you, we printed these rule books, so this is the only way to play this game. No. I play a lot of different games, and I change things in games all the time to fit my gaming style, my play style, my players' play style better, to have more fun at the table, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to do. We're all here to have a good time, hang out with our friends, roll some dice, chuck some dice across the table and kill some monsters and take their stuff. And, you know, tell a story along the way. And that's cool. But play the D&D that you really enjoy, even if it's not using stuff from D&D. There are tons and tons of OSR products out there that you can get relatively cheap or free and check out the stuff from and use it in your games. I did a video on the Deathbringer thing, the Deathbringer game from Dungeon Professor the other day. I don't know that I would use it for a long-term campaign, but maybe for like a mini campaign, I think it would be fun to do. I think it's very grim dark, and it does rely a lot on very hand-waving the dungeon master or game master, whatever it is in that game. Death master? I don't know. But anyway, it relies a lot on them making decisions, making calls. What kind of spells can you find? How does turning undead actually work? Those are things that whoever's running the game has to kind of suss out for themselves and how they want it to play. So I know it sounds pretty basic and simple, but yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's about you finding the version of D&D that you really like. And a lot of times, if you've been doing this for a long time, you will find that your version of D&D is very seldom going to be just one set of rules. Now, I understand there are going to be people out there like, nope, I played 2nd edition, straight by the rules, never played anything else, we don't add anything in, and, you know, whatever. If that works for you, cool. That's the best version of D&D for you. But I wanted to make sure that there are people out there who know that you do not have to rely on one set of rules, even with stuff like the OSR. You don't have to rely on one set of rules. You can take one set of rules and then just add on the stuff you like or take out the stuff you don't like. One of the things I didn't like about White Box was that it did not include Magic Missile in the starting list in the book at all for Wizards. I had to get it out of one of the other books that James Spahn had wrote, and it was simple. It was one of the Arcana books that he had put out on DriveThruRPG. But I don't know, I just felt like I shouldn't have had to. The wizard didn't have really any offensive spell, and he needed an offensive spell, so I added it back in immediately. That was one of the first changes I made when I ran my White Box campaign. So yeah, just think about that when you're wondering about, well, is One D&D actually the One D&D? Like, this is the only rule set for playing D&D? No, it's not. Of course it's not. And honestly, I'm anticipating it's going to fall on its face pretty hard, considering how much they're relying on the digital aspect of it. And that has never been a strong suit for Wizard of the Coast. Not with D&D. I don't know about Magic. I'm not sure how their digital Magic stuff works. I don't play Magic. But with D&D, it's never been a strong suit. It's always had issues. and there's been a lot of letdown with it. So I'm not expecting it to be anywhere near as cool as they're trying to tell you it's going to be. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's going to be fantastic, and maybe it is the one D&D for you. And if that's the case, go for it. Because I want you to play the game of D&D that you want to play. And that, at the end of the day, comes down to what D&D do you and your friends like to play. Whether it's house rules incorporated in or rules as written. You have to decide that. Don't let a company tell you that that's the only way to do it. Until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.